So let's get started with our session today on how to handle the overload of this season. Now, as we begin, a little bit of background on me for you, those who don't know me. I have spent the majority of my working career around this whole idea of work-life balance, and time management, productivity, how to manage the struggle of too much to do. In fact, a great book you might want to read while you're sheltering in place was a book that launched my passion for this focus in my speaking and training career, and it's called Margin, M-A-R-G-I-N, by Dr. Richard Swenson. Fascinating book, written around 1990, and he goes into so much great detail about how busy we've gotten and all the things we have going on, and it's amazing all the things that have come to fruition that he began to talk about in that book from many years ago. So the book is called Margin. I'll also send it to you in the follow-up email as far as a link to that book. I am a keynote speaker and author. You see a couple of my books on the right side. That's why you saw the elephants on our first slide, which is the whole idea behind juggling elephants, which means you need to manage your work and life like it's a circus. And we'll touch on a couple ideas from that book today, although the subject matter is more broad. I do live in North Carolina, as I always love to say. If you're not from North Carolina or not from the South, I'll try to keep my accent to a manageable minimum, but it is 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in North Carolina. So, of course, it may be getting a little bit thicker by this time in the day. All right, let's get started. You came for content, and that's what I want to provide to you. Overload. To me, the biggest source of overload right now in our lives is uncertainty. Biggest source of overload in our lives right now is uncertainty. Think about it for a moment. You don't have certainty about very many things, do you? If you're a parent, you don't have certainty about when your children are going to go back to school, if they are. I just heard from a friend in Utah today that, Utah has already said, no more school this year. They're out. They're done. So that at least they've got an answer. Okay, I know what to expect. But even when your children are home this summer, will they be able to go to events or not go to events? Will they be inside most of the time? How do I manage that? If you're working remotely, which most of us are right now, you're kind of going, when am I going to go back to some type of normalcy in my work schedule? And so you don't have certainty about that. You don't have certainty about when you're going to be able to get out and, go out and eat at a restaurant or spend time with friends and not have to be as concerned about the coronavirus. There's just so much uncertainty right now. And to me, that's the number one source of overload that we all have. It's a commonality. It's something we can all talk about other than the weather that, we just don't know. And so that makes our lives heavy, especially emotionally and mentally. In my coaching sessions with clients over the past few weeks, I've been challenging all of them. Take more breaks, invest more time in yourself, because you don't realize just how much this overload is weighing you down. Can I be the first to raise my hand on this session and say, I'm not sleeping as well at night. And it's not that I'm not exercising during the day. I'm actually eating better than I normally would. And I'm getting to spend time with two of the three most important people in my life, my wife and a 16-year-old daughter. My older daughter, of course, lives somewhere else. But it's, all the pieces are there. But all of this uncertainty is creating a tremendous amount of weight and wearing down of us each day. And I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge that, which brings me to my first thought for you today. And that is, if you're going to manage the overload of this season, you first of all have to identify what is that overload. And I want you to look at this list on the page, which actually comes from that book, Margin, and just take a moment and look at this list. And as you look at the list, I want you to begin to think about, what do I see on here for me? What do I see on here for me? What are some of the types of overload that I recognize in my life? Certainly change overload. Choice overload is one that's common for many of us right now. Decision overload. I mean, there's so many on here that I notice that are certainly present in my life, and I'm hearing them in conversations with others, that they're just feeling the pressure from these kinds of things. Now, as you're looking at this list, I want you to do something for me. I want you to kind of begin thinking about 3 or 4 of the different types that you recognize. And as you're doing that, a reminder to all the participants, if you haven't already, go ahead and mute your microphone so that everyone can hear clear today. If you haven't done so already, please mute your microphone. But take a look at this list of types of overload and pick out maybe the top 2 or 3. And here's why I wanted you to do that. If we look at this next matrix, I want you to think about where your overload would fit in this box, if you will, or which box in the larger box. Is this something that, as you think about your overload, that you've got a high amount of control and it's a high priority? Is it box 2? It's a high priority. I'd love to deal with this overload, but I've got a low amount of control. Or is it something that you have a high amount of control and, yeah, I could do a lot about it, but just doesn't seem to make that much difference, so it's a box 3? Or is it something that you've got a low priority and a low amount of control? I mean, you don't really have any control, and it's not really bothering you that much. I think it's critical that you begin to identify your overload. When I'm working with clients and they usually, somebody finds me from a coaching standpoint because my life is just out of control and I just need to get more control and I need to figure out what I'm going to do here and there. And I'll say, okay, well, let's just start simple. What are you overloaded with? And their first comment is everything. Well, unfortunately, we can't deal with everything. That's overwhelming, isn't it? And that's kind of how it may seem for many of you right now, is that, there's just so many pieces, Jones, where there's uncertainty, and I do feel overwhelmed. And I would encourage you, the first place to start is to identify your top 2 or 3 types of overload. Name them. Begin to think about, what is it that's causing the most pressure for me? And then to see where that overload fits in one of these 4 boxes. And if it's something that's on the top line, then maybe it's time for you to take a look at it and go, okay, how could I make some changes to address that type of overload? In fact, if we go back to the list for a moment, if we think about this box and what you can do, think about information overload, the bottom left one on the screen. Aren't we all suffering from information overload? I found it was very similar for me now that it was back in the terrorist attacks, because I found that, I just wanted to take in so much information. There was so much to just try to absorb. And just as I did then, I now realized very soon after the pandemic started, I can't be available for all that information because it's too overwhelming. And so I actually discipline myself now that I don't read any news or check any information except twice a day. I check it in the morning, see what's happened overnight, and then I check it in the evening to see what's happened that day. That's a logical step I could take to help manage my information overload. For the rest of you, it may be something different. And what is it that you could do to begin to address that type of overload so that you begin to have a little more control and a little more consistency about your energy, because you're not feeling so overloaded with that? Now, that's the first step, is identifying your overload. The second one is to create some level of routine. We've been ripped out of our routines, haven't we? I mean, I used to get in my vehicle and drive to work, do work there, come home, rush around in the evening and take people, family members places, or go check on other people, or had my own responsibilities or a side hustle I was working on. And now that routine has been completely changed, and we're still trying to figure out what this new routine looks like. I love what Seth Godin said about this whole idea of routines, because he said that, without habits, every decision requires attention, and attention is exhausting. Love that phrase. Attention is exhausting. Remember I talked about overload a moment ago? Some of us are facing decision overload and choice overload. And if you've got to be making decisions, and so many decisions each day, is it any wonder that you're just exhausted by mid-afternoon? So it's important to create some level of routine. What are some things that you can put in place that can almost happen almost without thinking? Now, we're not talking so much about habits. Habits are a whole nother level. And if you can develop those, that's great. But what are some things that you could do that are routine, that will happen consistently in your day? For example, after I finish breakfast, I walk outside for a minute, breathe in some fresh air, and then I come back in and get started with work. When I finish my work in the evening, I, put a cover over my workspace, or I close the door. What are some routines you can begin to create so that you have some sense of control and normalcy in your life right now? Because it's been taken away from us, and we've got to take back some. Certainly we can't take back all of it because of the unknown that this pandemic has brought, but you got to create some level of routine. Another one that I invite you to think about is this whole idea of adopting the good enough philosophy. We've had to change our standards about things, haven't we? And that can cause a sense of overload. We can't have a certain level of groceries, perhaps, in our homes that we wanted to have. We can't keep our homes the way they were, because now we've got all these people who are flowing in and out and have expectations of what's supposed to happen there. Maybe we aren't dressing the same as we were when we were working in that physical workspace. And I have found over the years that when I start feeling overloaded, I got to start somewhere and go, what's good enough? Because one of the reasons we're overloaded, because we want something to be better. We want it to be more than it is. And that's admirable. I mean, life is all about continuous improvement and grabbing each moment and seizing the day, if you will. But I think there's cases, especially in times like this, when our resources, physical, mental, emotional, financial, are being, taken from us in so many ways. We've got to find some places to say, here's a place that's good enough, and I'm okay with where it's at. So here's your sentence to work on. My blank would be good enough if. My blank would be good enough if. Personal example, and we are recording this session, so of course my wife Lisa can go back and hear that I said this, but I got to tell you, right now, our living room area is not tidy, and I'm kind of a tidy person. My wife would say I'm really a picky, tidy person, but I don't think I am. But that's neither here nor there. We'll do one on relationships later. But when I think about that, and the reason it's untidy is because Lisa and Sydney are making masks for our local nursing home, and they're making some for other people, and because Sydney loves sewing, and it's a service opportunity for them. And so I'll go upstairs in the evening, and I mean, our living room is just, and normally I'd kind of go, but I had to calm myself down and say, you know what? During this season, our living room is good enough if the floor is vacuumed once a week. Now that's taking it way down for me. Not that I'm super picky about organization, but I just say, floor is good enough if it's vacuumed twice a week. So we vacuumed, I think, Monday, and we'll probably vacuum on Friday for the weekend. Not because anybody's going to be there, but because it's the second time of the week. What's good enough right now? And maybe there's some other parts of your life that you need to stop and go, I don't have to have that level right now. It's okay if it's here. Maybe it's with meals. You're trying to create amazing meals each meal time. Maybe you just say, I'm going to simplify things, so I'm not investing so much time trying to figure that out. Maybe your work. Maybe there's some responsibilities related to work. You can go, you know what? This is good enough right now. It won't be when things return to some new normal, but right now it is. So what could you start saying is good enough for you? So that's another step in the process. Something else that I found that helps with overload is getting some clarity by using daily questions. What happens when we're overloaded is that we find ourselves just kind of being paralyzed, because I could go do that, but there's 54 other things that really need to be done today. And so I'll probably get 4 done. So I've still got 50. Yay, me. And I find that daily questions help you to break down your day a little bit and help you to focus where you need to be putting some time and energy that maybe you normally wouldn't. And so daily questions is a tool from Marshall Goldsmith. And it's when you ask yourself 3 to 5 questions at the end of each day to rate yourself on how you're doing. Personal accountability, personal well-being, or even your workload for that matter. But it helps you to focus your energy and not be so scattered with so many things going on. And here's some examples in my world right now. One of my 3 daily questions is, did I do my best to engage in at least one self-care activity? because we're neglecting that during this season. Secondly, engage in one professional growth activity. That may just be reading an article about improving myself for virtual presentations, or what does the speaking and training industry look like, come August or October, or how to lead a successful virtual event, or different things like that. Did I do something, just one thing for that? And then finally, did I do my best to be fully present with those around me? Because I find when I'm overloaded, I sometimes neglect those very same people who could pour into me so much emotionally, because I'm just so scattered and thinking about so many things. So that helps me to focus my attention, and then I get the benefit of taking that action to help with my overload. So daily questions. Next one is finish something. Is to finish something. Let me give you a little insight on your mind. And if any of you have ever been a part of one of my work-life balance sessions, I talk about this. Your brain has a condition called the Zeigarnik effect. And I'm not going to go into all the history of it because we're limited on time. But the Zeigarnik effect is that our brains want things to be done, to be finished. And so that's the way our brain thinks. That's why when you look at your task list and you've got 15 things there, and you've got different ones, if you've got one on there that's multifaceted and it's going to take a long time, and then you've got one that you can get done in about 5 minutes, your brain's going to go, pick that one, the 5-minute one. Why? Because you can finish it. And the endorphins go off in your head and you go, I accomplished something. One of the things I find when people are overloaded is they've got so many unfinished things. And every one of those unfinished tasks or activities causes you to feel a weight. And it kind of is taking up some mental real estate, because you really can't focus on what's in front of you, because you're just like, I haven't done this, I haven't done that, I haven't stopped this, I haven't worked on that. And so my challenge to you is to help with your overload is to invest some time each day in finishing some things. Maybe it's a simple home project that you have been working on for a while and you've kind of let go. Maybe it's just some clothes that you've washed and they need to be folded, because every time you don't finish something, your mind is reminding you of it. So invest some time to finish the things that you're working on, and be willing to start small with that. I love reading things by Dave Ramsey, the financial planner and advisor. And, if you followed any of his stuff, one of the things he talks about is the debt snowball. That if you owe money for things, that you don't start with the biggest debt, you start with the smallest one. And by starting with the smallest one and knocking it out, that gives you some momentum. And then you knock the next biggest one out, because you've got the money from the other one that you no longer are paying, and now you can knock it out. And then you use that money to go to a bigger debt. I think it's the same with getting momentum to manage all this stuff that's going on in your world right now. Start with something small that you can finish, and then pick something else that's a little larger, then something else that's a little larger. And I think you'll find that you start feeling more in control, and you've created more certainty in your life, which I think is critical in these times. My final point to you, and then we'll be going to your questions and comments and your thoughts, is you got to remember your 3 rings. I mentioned that I wrote the book Juggling Elephants, or co-wrote the book Juggling Elephants with Todd Musig. And you got to remember, when you're overloaded, you have to take care of all 3 areas of your life. Right now, you may be a parent who's investing a tremendous amount of time in the relationship with your children and trying to make sure they're getting their schoolwork done. You're probably also trying to get some work done. And the ring you're neglecting is that self ring. And what we learn from a circus is that a circus is only good if there's quality acts in all 3. And so I think it's critical you begin to look at, which one am I neglecting? And what are some small routines? We'll start tying it together here. What are some small routines you could engage in that would help you for that particular area? If you say, well, Jones, I don't have time for myself. Sure you do. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's 10 minutes. Maybe it's 15. I got to tell you, again, a moment of personal thought here. My new favorite song, when I kind of feel some pressure and I just want to take a few moments for myself, there's a song, Fall on Me by Andrea Bocelli. I love just saying that. And his son, Matteo. Turn that song on and turn it up loud. And I guarantee you, when it's over, you will go, And it's only 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I checked. So, you know, that's a quick way for me to refresh and renew and have a new perspective on life. You know, but remember that you've got to have quality things going on in all three areas of your life if you want to be, you know, managing that overload more effectively. Finally, I'm going to open it for questions in just a moment. Here's some other ways that you can get contact with me as we talk about overload, work-life balance, time management, and those things. But I just wanted to throw this up on the screen before I stopped sharing it so that you can have that information in case you need it. With that, I have stopped sharing the PowerPoint, and this is now your opportunity.